And if we get a bit of echo, we get a bit of echo. Cool. Anyway, we are live. 20 minutes later than expected, but we're live. I'm here with Dom Taranto from Redbubble. Good morning. It's a Tuesday morning, bit grim and cold in Ballarat, but how are you?
I'm very well, Simon. Thanks so much for having me. Yes, I'm all rugged up. The fire and the heater are on at the same time.
Beautiful. Cool. Now, we might get a bit of an echo. We've already agreed that we don't care. We're just going to crack on in the face of adversity. But what are we talking about? We're talking about belonging today, something that's close to our heart in terms of sort of diversity and building diverse teams. And we're going to unpack a bit of what it is, why businesses need it, how they know it works, what it's all about, and all of that sort of stuff.
The big questions.
The other big questions, we're tackling the tricky stuff. So your title at Redbubble is Belonging Lead or Head of Belonging?
Yeah, it's a great question because it changes quite regularly. But at the moment, it is Workplace Programs and Belonging Lead.
Gotcha.
And that's two separate things, but that's for a reason, especially as my role has changed and evolved over time. We've kind of packaged it all together.
Nice. So first, let's tackle them sort of in a relatively logical order. Then, what is belonging? What is workplace belonging for the uninitiated, for the heathens?
Absolutely. So, for the heathens, which I am definitely one. The term belonging was something relatively new to me. I'd heard of diversity and equity and inclusion before, especially in the workplace, but the term belonging was, a bit foreign to me. And it wasn't until Redbubble sort of introduced me to the term that my ears definitely pricked up, because I think it's a lot more relatable a word, or it's less confronting a word for some folks, which I really love. And I have definitely been teased amongst my friends. What do you mean you're head of belonging? But I think the title sort of says itself, and that's how I approach it. You really want people who come into the workplace to feel like they have a sense of belonging. They want to be there. They feel like they have ownership of the workplace. They have ownership of the people the way that people view them and treat them and respect them. And that takes, it takes lots of people to do that. It's not just the individual, but Redbubble as the employer needs to create a space in which that sense of belonging can be achieved for people from all sorts of backgrounds.
Yeah. And I guess it's one thing for businesses to go out in the world and say, we're all about diversity and inclusion. There's this thing that we sort of battle with constantly. I think this, it can almost border on tokenism, but the inclusion part is the follow on from the marketing side of we're all about diversity. Like, how do you actually live that day to day? And is that the area that your work touches on?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think why it exists at Redbubble specifically, like Redbubble has always had a really long-standing history of providing a safe space, not just in their workplaces, but also on the site itself, which I'm sure we'll get into.
Yeah.
And the founders of Redbubble, they really celebrated diversity and inclusion in a really informal way, as is pretty common for startup companies. But because of that, it really became like a foundational part of Redbubble culture, which is great. And I know a lot of businesses can't say that, or don't have the luxury of that being such an early part of their formation. But I think as it's grown and it's grown up, essentially, the P&C team has really made like a concerted effort to sort of protect the result of those grassroots efforts and maintain it as part of our value system and sort of improve and, more importantly, formalize programs. So as that work has never been done, it's just sort of been, you've stumbled across it, or it's naturally occurred. As we've grown, we've obviously needed to formalize it, which is very exciting, and we're still in the process of doing that.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that I love on the careers page and in the About Us sort of area on our site is this phrase, it takes all the crayons in the box, and I think that's something that people can relate to. But on a day-to-day perspective, what does your role involve?
Yeah, I love this question. Because it's so tricky, and it's not the same for everyone, because it is really reflective of where the business is at. But you know, let's go down the shopping list, as it were. As someone as I've been with the company for close to 9 years, I've really had sort of the privilege to see it grow, and I've definitely grown alongside with it. But my role is, as I said, it's ever changing, and it entails quite a few elements. And I mentioned earlier, it's sort of transitioning at the moment. But primarily what I'm doing today is that I get to collaborate with our talent team on really making sure we attract a diverse pool of candidates. So that's working on their campaigns and their processes, just to make sure that everything is as it should be. I get to partner on the Redbubble employee value proposition, which I think is also really cool, and my tenure definitely helps that. I get to coach and mentor some of our hiring managers, which is a very important element, which I know we will get into in a bit. And I'm sort of stepping away from more generalized events and celebrations, which was that grassroots element I was talking about. And as that's handed over to our newly formed workplace experience team, I'm sort of more excited to become more of a resource or a partner for them. That's in that talent area, and I'm a big supporter of that first step in what we call them bubblers, but in an employee's life cycle at Redbubble. But more generally, when it comes to belonging, or what we call belonging at Redbubble, I lead the development and the delivery of the belonging strategy, which up until now has been just a P&C focal area. But we are now sort of graduating into a more comprehensive company-wide ESG strategy. So I really plan to partner with that team really closely. And then recently, we just released our global Redbubble group diversity policy, which I helped co-write. And we're about to launch another Redbubble residency art program. So that's connecting with our artist customers as well. So it's quite a range of things that I do day to day.
Yeah. And I know you've got a couple of people, I think, that work closely with you, one in Melbourne and one in San Fran as well.
That's correct, yes.
Yeah,
so
beautiful.
Obviously the majority of people are in the Melbourne office, but San Francisco's been with us for a very long time, and Berlin is, I wouldn't say new, but I'm looking forward to talking a little bit about Berlin and how that's been a different journey for us, especially from a belonging perspective. But it's very global in its nature, which is again fantastic.
It's one thing that's sort of been sort of puzzling me, and I'm really interested in your thoughts. Is, you know, we've got the medal at the moment for the most locked down city in the world. Hard enough to get connection properly through lockdown. You know, in a previous discussion we had with someone on a previous episode, we sort of talked about the non-transactional sort of dialogue that you get when you're connected with people physically, that you miss out on. How do you drive belonging then when you're also locked down? Does that make your job even harder?
I guess a simple answer is yes, it definitely makes it harder. And if anyone knew me, they would know that, or if you ask my bosses, they would say probably one of the greatest strengths that I have is that person-to-person connection, that face-to-face. I'm able to disarm tense situations, or I'm very open about who I am and my experiences, which has definitely allowed others who are maybe not as extroverted as I am to feel like they can follow suit and do the same. As soon as that is taken away from me, which it has been for months on end, I feel a bit disempowered that one of my strongest abilities is completely gone, or I have to rely just on a screen to do that. In saying that doesn't mean it's not possible. And a lot of, even though we're losing that body language, which is so important, this essentially what I'm saying doesn't change. So I think the way that we've sort of tackled that at Redbubble, I think lockdown has definitely opened people up to be a lot more vulnerable. Your kids are in the background, your house is in the background, your personal life comes into your work even more so than I think when you go into an office. So as soon as we were given that sort of in, and people are needing to share a little bit about their personal situations at home because of challenges they may be facing, it was almost as if half the work was done for us. And I find in belonging work, a lot of my battle is just trying to get people to bring something other than their work selves into the working environment. So it's a yes and a no answer, but I think it's been a good learning and a good challenge, and it's disarmed a lot of us and allowed us to be more of ourselves than you would have normally thought. But there's obviously the restrictions of not being able to do that face to face. You can't ever replace that.
Yeah, it's one of the, I want to say it's a blessing, but your comment around you sort of start to get to see inside of people's homes. You get to see who they really are. That's stuff that you wouldn't do if we were all at work. So it's sort of spun this interesting sort of scenario the other way around, isn't it? We're missing connection physically, but in a way we're kind of getting to see more of who people are outside of just work, see them for the real humans they are. It's this weird state that we're in.
But it is important, though, to recognize that you have to let that in. You have to accept that. You have to be willing to receive that as a business. And I know of businesses that have definitely shut that window and shut that opportunity down.
Yeah.
Whereas I think Redbubble was naturally doing it already before a lockdown. But instead of us shutting that door, I think we've embraced it even more. So that is a good point to make.
Yeah. You touched on a point earlier, part of your day-to-day work, to working with hiring managers and that sort of stuff, around, so helping them with some coaching. What are some of the challenges you see there? Is there like an expectation that sometimes people have of this is what I'm going to do, or they're not 100% sure what our culture looks like until they actually get here? And all right, now I'm dealing with I'm in scenarios that I didn't think I'd be in. I'm not sure how to deal with it.
Yeah, I think we'll need a whole other hour to go into to the challenges that different hiring managers have. Some of the big ones that pop up for me, there's that age old, it's too hard, it's more work. It's why do we need to spend more time trying to find more people when I've got 5 white men right now that I could just pick from, and they probably would all do the job, at least on paper, or if it was outcomes based, they would tick the boxes. So I think first of all, there's that notion that it's meant to be harder, or it takes more time, or it's an added step. That's a challenge. I think there's if you have a pool of people that aren't even aware what unconscious bias is, I don't think you can have those follow-on conversations just yet. You need to bring people to an understanding that they are biased, and that's not something to be ashamed of or guilty of. It's the work needs to be put in to try and challenge that. I think what I find unique in the tech industry is that because people are very fascinated by process-driven outcomes, there's a natural fascination of wanting to get the best outcome, regardless. And once you sort of bait them, or you sort of entice them with like, don't you want to be the best at what you're doing? Well, guess what? The best way you can do this is actually not to just do it in your head and stick within your own experiences. So it's still, I'm going off track. I think it's important for people to first understand their unconscious biases, and then that opens up you to have those follow-on conversations around what do they need to be trained on, or what do they didn't realize they didn't know. So you've got to have the right tools for that, and not everyone will learn the exact same way. So it's easy for me to put together a program for hiring managers, but again, it's going to work for some and not for others. So it does need to be done one-on-one with each of these hiring managers. It's not just to tick the box and you're accredited as.
It's a learning curve, isn't it? I think it's an evolution for some businesses. And I think the more it's sort of embedded in vernacular of some business, like this is how we operate, the easier it is for people to assimilate and learn and pick up on that stuff. If you're starting from scratch, obviously a lot harder.
Yeah, I guess to boil it down, my job is really to normalize this way of thinking in the workplace. And I think once people get to a point where they know that this is something that should become part of their everyday, it doesn't seem like it's extra work or added work. In fact, it probably will save you time in the long run. Then half the battle's over, and you don't need to try and sell them on this is the right thing to do or this is a feel-good thing to do. It's this is benefiting everyone across the board, so it's a no-brainer.
It's just the way we should be doing things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So for businesses that know they want to do stuff in this space, where do they start?
Yeah, that's a that's a good question. I've often been the person asking this question, and it's funny to be on the receiving end of it. I wish there was a simple answer. I think the thing is that it really depends on the current culture and business goals. For me, if someone could sort of go back in time and give me the advice, it would be to just pause and try and not save the world in one day. There are so many things that you could potentially do or think about, but what your business and your position is that uniquely equips you to bring about the most change. I think that's a really good place to start.
Yeah.
And Redbubble's in the process of doing this at the moment. Grassroots stuff is naturally, you're trying to cater to everyone and everything and try and solve everything. And often you just miss the mark across the board.
Yeah.
And Redbubble at the moment, going through that ESG strategy work, is really starting to have the great conversations of what does Redbubble do that others don't do, and what position are we in to bring about the most change. So that's a good place to start. And then as for approach, I really think it starts with people. If you haven't got people who share your values and behaviors, you're handicapping yourself. And once you've got people on that same page, even if they're at all different levels of experience and they're obviously going to have different perspectives, which you want, but as long as you have that fundamental language that you can talk about and agree on, that's really where you put your effort into promoting inclusive behavior. And as you know, sort of as a key focus, and it's not that added work as we were talking about.
It's funny, isn't it? There's this thing where there are things some people get. I say people, I mean businesses get confused on where you have a common set of values. This is the way we treat each other. This is the way we think about problems. These are the things that are important to us. But you can still have differences of opinion.
Absolutely. And I think you want difference of opinion.
And I think that's where some people sort of get these things confused. So do you think then it's kind of fair to say that a lot of the work that you do is from a belonging perspective? You think about the effort that businesses put into telling the world that they're diverse, they're inclusive, and they want to get all the benefits of that. But if you're not then creating a workforce, an environment where people feel that they belong and that they want to stay, you're constantly going to be sort of reinventing the wheel, and you're going to go through this cycle of churn.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's that word that I used earlier, ownership. I've always felt, I can obviously just talk from my experience more so than anyone else's, but Redbubble, and why I think I've been so successful at Redbubble and stayed at Redbubble, is because I genuinely feel like I feel ownership of the company. It's not the CEO's company. It's not the founder's company. I feel like it's a part, I'm a 1 millionth owner of it, or whatever the numbers are.
Yeah.
And where's that sense of ownership, you can translate that into belonging in a way. But I feel that when I walk into that office, what I say matters, what I say will be listened to, and what I say will be reflected in the business if it is of value and it contributes to the business. And I guess that's more of a businessy definition of what belonging is, but I think that's maybe more tangible than just, it's not about feeling good. Like I can feel shitty and still be in the office. Sorry for swearing, but it's even in that sense of feeling like crap in the office, I still feel like I belong and I'll be listened to, and I'm part of the family and the team. But ownership, maybe ownership is another way of, another perspective for people that might help them understand.
So if a business was going to start, wanting to make a start on rolling something out, where would they start, do you think?
In like a belonging initiative? You could, a couple of ways. You could go down the way that Redbubble did, and it made a conscious effort early on that it wanted to offer equity in its salary packages, for instance. And I know that sounds a little icky, it's money and so on, but Redbubble was never going to be in a position that it could compete with the bigger tech businesses and give you the most money or pay the most money and walk into a Google office. But equity in the business was something that was adopted before it even went public. And to me, as someone that was part of that system as it kicked off, that was fantastic, and has, I won't say for everybody, but I'd say for the vast majority of people that have joined the business since then, the equity packages that we offer are pretty amazing. That's one route you can go. The other route is more of that, what I was talking about earlier, that grassroots sort of element. So Redbubble, when it wanted to start delving into this area, it couldn't formally hire someone like myself to be a dedicated role within the P&C team. It needed to sort of happen naturally and organically without anyone putting any formal effort into it. And I think it was very smart on Redbubble's part to identify people like myself who were naturally doing the sort of activities and behaviors that they wanted to promote, and give me the freedom to just run with it and step back and let that community speak up and organize and do what they wanted to do. And if it was something as simple as a small budget throughout the year where we got to celebrate national holidays or international events, there was never a question about whether we should or shouldn't. It was just, of course, this means something to you. Go ahead. If you want to host a lunch, or if you want to have an informal chat or a working, whatever it was, Redbubble never said no. It was like, this means something to you, so it means something to us. And I think naturally, as more and more of those sorts of events and activities and behaviors started to form, before you knew it, you had a whole calendar of things happening that no one really needed to manage, no one really needed to have ownership of, but were occurring and therefore embedding itself into the culture. And that's where it's gotten us to today, where they could formally have someone like me in a role like what I do. So that's two different directions you could possibly go. One is a little more regimented, and one's a little bit more organic.
And so then how does the business sort of measure how successful it is, or what ROI they're getting?
Yeah, this question is a good one, and it's a scary one because it's tricky and it's not easy, and I'm still learning a lot about this area. So how do you measure like efficacy and success in this area, right? I know a lot of work and effort has been done in other industries and other businesses in this, and I'm constantly reading and learning, and resourcing is a big ingredient in this that makes it a lot easier. But anyway, for instance, I think there's sort of three key areas that Redbubble have seen value, with the caveat they're not the only ones. Our success as a business has sort of been on the potential to bring success and opportunity for so many others in our ecosystem. So it's not even just our employees, it's also our artists and our fulfillers that we have helped build that we've helped fund that ecosystem or help it grow beyond just the Redbubble sole business itself, which I think is, again, really unique to Redbubble. But firstly, sort of in our talent team, I think our talent team is world-class and have really led the charge at Redbubble. So we're able to consistently attract and retain diverse talent in such an incredibly competitive market. I said before, we may never really be able to offer the most money or the most amazing offices and all that sort of stuff, but what we do offer is a really healthy and authentic work culture, and especially, like you said, during a pandemic, it really shines. I think secondly, Redbubble has made a real concerted effort to engage different markets, and the importance of D&I has been really essential for innovation and growth. And that's what I wanted to talk about with Berlin. It's been so obvious for us when we were looking at this new market that we couldn't be a bunch of Americans or a bunch of Australians trying to set up a business in Europe, because it fails. And we've seen many examples of that. And then lastly, like, it's not as exciting, but it's maybe a bit more stereotypical, but you can measure success of blogging through your engagement and your inclusivity survey results. And I think, again, we've seen such great results in that area from day one. And that's sort of led us to improve even more, especially around leadership development. That was a big area for us.
And I guess, if you wanted to sort of take it even further, you could probably look at things like, retention. Does your staff retention over time improve? You've been with the business 9 years,
almost 9, yeah.
And I think even in my short time sort of dealing with people in the business, there seems to be a whole bunch of people that have been there for probably equal to some even longer. There's quite a large sort of group of those people that have been there for quite a while, which probably is testament to build an environment, build a culture where people feel they belong and they have a home, and hey, surprise, they'll stay.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it is important, though, because I mentioned attracting and retaining, but those things can't be seen just on their own. I think that that's the biggest thing that I have learned when you're trying to measure the success of something like this, is that it can't come down to any one magical number. Sometimes you shouldn't retain people. I know that sounds controversial, but you don't want to have the same people all the time. You need new people, and and sometimes people do need to move on. And I don't think Redbubble's ever been shy or scared of doing that in the workplace in the most positive way. I think everyone's very excited when people move on to new and exciting opportunities that are best for them. To me, it's almost a paradox. You're meant to measure success by retaining people. That's a good sign, but also people leaving and going on to better opportunities is also a sign of success. So I think, if I had to sum everything up, what I've learned from trying to measure the success of all of this work is that there is no one thing. You need to look at it as a bigger, complex picture overall.
Yeah, and every business is different as well. Every business has different strategies, different things that they're trying to achieve. Not every business has a community of artists as customers. So the things that impact your business are going to be different to a financial institution, for example. So
I think like some of my favorite stories, especially around talent, and I can't stress it enough how proud I am of what the talent team at Redbubble has done. But when I hear stories of hiring managers say that they've led with an acknowledgement of country, or they've led with pronouns before they even get into interview questions, we get that feedback from candidates that are just like, no one's ever done that before. And how do you measure that? But you almost can't. But I'm just happy to know that is happening in itself, even if it's not done perfectly or whatever. But it's a sign in itself that it is working, that it's present.
And it sort of ties into this other thing, this idea that I have as well, is that good relationships aren't about big grandiose moments. Like I was sort of ridiculed Valentine's Day. Once a year you show your partner how much you like them by buying them a big bunch of flowers and everything's all right. But it's really the little things every day that you do that show people how much you care about them. And that's true of working relationships as well. You can have great big events for something, but it's the day-to-day moments that matter throughout the tenure of employment. They're the things that really show people how much you care. And so in interviews, those little moments that you're talking about are the things that people remember.
They make a huge difference.
Yeah. Brilliant. we could probably, as you already said, sit and talk about this all day. Any closing things you wanted to mention? Anything we've missed that you wanted to touch on?
No, we obviously could say so much. I've learned a lot in the past year and a half, and have sat in and listened to podcasts such as this. So I really appreciate it. I think it's really important that more conversations like this have. I would never describe myself as a D&I expert, but I have always valued at the end of these sorts of sessions, people have three really, or, you know, if it's three takeaways or if it's something to take away, something practical, because it's very easy to get carried away with the higher level feel good. We know this is the right thing to do, but something practical. But so I'll leave you with some takeaways. If you fundamentally don't understand why D&I work is really essential for the success of your business, like why this will not add value for you as a business, to me, that's a first sign that you need to stop and you need to go do some learning. If your board or your executive are not on that same page, and I also would encourage people when they're hiring for board and executive levels, ask them about this topic because it can be quite decisive, I think, at the end of the day. You need to go back and do some learning. For leaders, empowering our managers, like our hiring managers or our people managers, it's a big bucket of work and something Redbubble has had some success in and wants to do more in. They need to actually lead, and they need to not just be assessed on outcomes. They need to be assessed on other metrics other than whether they deliver a project. That's a big one. And I said it multiple times, but inclusive behavior really should not be thought of as like a roadblock. It should just become at the core of everything that people do every day. So that's it.
Mate, thank you so much. This has been really useful for me, enlightening for me, and I'm hoping anyone that watches as well gets something out of it, even if it's those three things, and listen to us rambling on from it. Mate, beautiful. Thank you so much. I'm going to let you get on with your day. We've been probably just over half an hour, but mate, brilliant to see you. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Too. Thank you so much, Simon. Good luck, everyone. Bye-bye.